Welcome to Right on the Mark with your host, Mark Young. Today, we're going to be talking about everyone's favorite summer place to go, and that was the Elks Club. Boy, back in the day in the Mon Valley, everybody seemed to have gone to the Elks. If it was for swimming, if it was to play basketball, it was just a general place to hang out. There was a concession stand, there was a club, there were some diving boards, there was even a baby pool. But one thing was certain, if it was summertime in the Mon Valley, you were going to the Elks. I remember growing up as a kid, my parents taking me there, probably 6, 7, 8 years old. They had a baby pool there. Uh, couldn't go into the large pool. The large pool was a 3'6" all the way down to 12 foot, which seemed huge back then. I mean, when you were 6, 7, 8 years old, going into a 12-foot pool just seemed unbearable. But boy, it was a sight to see. I'll tell you what, people came from all over to go to the Elks. I mean, you saw people from Belle Vernon, from Charleroi, from Monessen. You had to join the Elks. So there was family passes, there was single passes, there was, just any. You actually had to know somebody to get into the Elks so you could be a member to go to the Elks. So it was kind of an exclusive club, I want to say, back in the day. My folks had bought passes for us. It wasn't lifetime passes, but we had yearly passes. I wanted to say it was $75 per family a year. We're going back to the early 70s. This all started. Me and my friends would meet up at the Elks and we would go swimming. We'd play basketball. We'd go off the diving boards. This went on probably until well into high school, probably after high school as well. Things were thriving back then, 70s and 80s, and everybody could be seen up at the Elks Club. You finished school in June and then you went to the Elks all the way through Labor Day. Possibly even through football camp. They'd have steak dinners up there. They'd have events up there. So it wasn't just a swimming pool that everybody gathered for. It was for teen night. It was for family night. It was for certain occasions that you'd want to celebrate things there. I can remember going there for some of our high school functions there. There was awards there. You could rent out the place for baby showers there. There was a small bar there. Just so many things to do. And some of the things that I loved to do up there was to play basketball. You'd have so many kids playing basketball that you had to gather a team and you had to form a team of five and you have to challenge the team that won on the court. And one of the biggest things was recruiting your team. So there was myself, there was Jimbo, there was David, there was Bobby, there was Jamie, there was Todd. Some of my childhood friends that we would go up there day in and day out and just play basketball. And after that, you all went in the pool. When we got older into our early teens, we were up there every day. It opened at 1 p.m. Before that, they had swim team practice. Swim team practice was from 12 to 1. And you couldn't go in the pool until 1. So we would get there early and just wait, watch swim team practice before we can go in the pool at 1. So you'd probably swim from probably 1 till I'd say 5 or 6 o'clock nonstop. They had a concession stand there, so lunch or dinner wasn't a problem there. They had pizza, they had hot dogs, they had hamburgers. They had snacks, they had drinks, anything that you wanted. Back then, I just remember people bringing coolers. If you didn't want to spend money at the concession stand, you could bring coolers. You could bring your drink, your own food. I do remember a lot of the older women watching their kids. They'd be drinking Fresca, something like that, because it's just very refreshing. And I'm not even sure if they make that drink anymore, but boy, you saw a lot of Fresca back in the day. That's kind of funny. I can remember a time when I couldn't wait to be a teenager because they had teen night up there. So you were 10, 11, and 12. You always heard about teen night, but you actually couldn't go and feel the vibe to see what it was all about. You just had heard from people what teen night was about. And you had always heard that, man, it was good stuff. You can go night swimming. You get to visit with all the girls. You get to see your buddies late into the night until it got dark. Boy, I'll tell you what, that was the thing to do was to go to the Elks at night. I mean, things were lit up, the patio was on, people were watching you swimming, the bar was open, they were serving drinks, serving food, and you were swimming and you felt like all eyes were on you, especially at night with the lights on. That was probably one of my favorite things to do. But again, you couldn't do it till you were 13 years old. So I can remember playing baseball. And I remember just pitching and talking to my catcher, Jimbo, and saying, Jimbo, do you realize we can go to the Elks after this game? And he's like, Mark, you're only 12. You can't go to the Elks. But I had heard through the grapevine that some people were allowed to go to team night when you were 12, which was really crazy. But that was our focus back then. I talked to my cousin Rick, cousin Kevin. I talked to my cousin Joe, and would all meet up there after the baseball game. One of the funny quirks about playing baseball, Bronco League baseball, is the coaches never wanted you to swim on a day of a game. They just felt like it took a lot out of you. They're thinking if you played basketball, if you went swimming, you played basketball, went swimming again, you ate, and then you try to play a baseball game at night, you just weren't at 100% at all. So I know my dad was one of the coaches. There was many other coaches out there that would actually scratch your skin to see if you had any chlorine marks on it. And if you had chlorine marks, he knew that you were at the pool, and guess what? You're riding the pine. You're not playing in the game because you went against the rules. I could remember on my days that I didn't have games, I would see kids try, and I knew their schedule. I would see kids trying to go swimming and trying to stay in the corner of 3'6" and not be seen because they had a game that day, but it was so dang hot they wanted to go in the pool. So they'd go in the pool and they thought they would hide, and at some point somebody actually saw them. So some coaches would see up there, some coaches wouldn't see up there. It was very subjective as to if you played or not. But I know on Lou Dodge, my father's team was if you were at the Elks and you were swimming, you just weren't going to play that day because that was the rule. And if you said you didn't go in a pool and you did, you'd get your arm scratched by one of the coaches and you'd have to ride the pine because you'd have to sit out. You just can't play baseball and swim at the same time, which I could never understand that. But that was one of my dad's rules. And whatever Coach Young said, actually goes. So yeah, that was one of the better stories that I had about the Elks. But there's many other things to do. I mean, you would play basketball continuously, game after game after game, especially if your team won every time. You would actually miss shots on purpose just to get off the court so you could go in the pool. That was actually great. I mean, the best thing about the basketball court was there was a high hoop and a low hoop. So the high hoop was 10 foot, and then the low hoop was probably 7 foot, maybe 8 foot, somewhere in between. I don't know. We never actually measured it, but a lot of people could dunk on that hoop. So you had a lot of kids there just wanting to get in and play. So on the high hoop, you actually had to shoot the ball to get it in. On the low hoop, everyone would just drive and try to dunk it and ram it down the rim. That was what I remember most about that basketball court, other than puddles building up when all the rain came. But that didn't stop us. We would just broom out the puddles and we would keep playing. Whenever it rained, people still would go up to the pool. They'd still go swimming at the Elks because that was the gathering place. That was where it was happening. Everybody was there. I can remember my friend Darren saying, "Hey, Mark, I'll pick you up at 11:30 to get there for 12 o'clock swim team," because he was on the swim team, and I would just hang out for an hour and watch them. That was when we were older, actually. We would drive up there, but most of the time we had to ride our bike. I should say more often than not, we either walked or rode our bike up there because we were under 16 at the time, and that was the time whenever everybody was around. I mean, you had a lot of girls in high school that were there, plus all your friends were there. The lovely Kim was there. That's where I met my wife there and all of her great friends. I mean, there was Lisa, there was Lauren, there was Terry, there was Julene. There was just so many people to go see. And you saw them in school year round, but you can never actually go out and talk with them. You had to wait to go to the Elks so you got a chance to talk to them to see how things were going with their life. I mean, You had football practice as well too. So this, you had junior high football and you had senior high football, but you had tests throughout the summer. So I remember getting through my test at the stadium and then going to the Elks and just relaxing and staying in the pool and just keeping cool. I did have a few incidents whenever I was up there. Every time you swim, there's always a danger of something could always happen. But I always thought that I was a strong swimmer. I took swimming lessons as a kid at the Elks, as a matter of fact. So they had swimming lessons before they had swim team practice, and then before they opened the pool at 1. So there was a lot of activity. But there's a couple times I remember going to the pool, and somebody dared me to do a sailor's dive. And me being really young, I did a sailor's dive, which is head first into the pool with your arms at your side, not out to protect yourself. So I actually did a sailor's dive in 3'6" and hit my head at the bottom of the pool. And man, boy, I thought I knocked myself out. I thought I had a concussion. I actually thought my head was bleeding at the time. So I turned to the kid that was next to me. I don't even know what his name was. And I says, "Hey, is my head bleeding?" He's like, "No, why?" I'm like, "Because I just did a sailor's dive with my hands to my side in 3'6". He's like, "No, you can't do that. You got to do that in 12 foot." So it's very dangerous up there. There's a lot of a lot of activity, a lot of people. So you're just diving into the pool and trying to do wild and crazy things. There was another time I could remember with heat exhaustion. I don't know if I didn't drink enough, if I didn't eat enough, but I was standing in line at the concession stand. And back then, you were 7, 8, 9 people deep in a concession stand line, and you're just waiting to get something to food. And I really felt faint. I really felt funny, and I just took a knee right there, and I just thought I was going to pass out. But what I think it was I was in the sun too long. But as soon as you got close to the counter of the concession stand, it was shaded. So as soon as I got in the shade, I took a knee, and I was able to regain my composure. But if I was in the sun the whole time, I might have just passed out. But I've heard of a lot of other people just passing out. Those are two scary events that I remember of my childhood growing up at the Elks. But there was other activities too. I mean, a lot of people played ping pong there. People played cards nonstop. I mean, you would go up there, take a break, go home, do whatever you had to do, cut the grass, come back, and people were still playing cards or playing ping pong or swimming. So you spent probably 6 to 7 hours a day, every day at the Elks. And boy, you really missed it whenever they closed it up at the end of the season. But, when I got older, I was able to go off the diving boards. I do have to tell you, I was afraid of heights. Probably still am. Probably respect heights more than I'm afraid of them now. But man, I can remember during, whenever I was getting swim lessons, and one of the lifeguards, can't remember his name, but he's like, "Go ahead, jump off the low dive, Mark. I'll be right here. Nothing's gonna happen." And I'd get to the edge of the board. I'd look down below, and all I'd see is like 12 foot of water, and you saw the bottom of 12 foot. And I'm like, whoa, this is scary. I mean, I know how to swim, but what if I don't float? I'm always just used to touching the bottom of the pool and staying afloat. So it took me a few days of swimming lessons to actually jump off that diving board. That was the low dive. That was probably only 3 or 4 feet off the ground. So imagine what it took for me to jump off the high dive. It probably took me another year to jump off the high dive, which was 10 feet high. And they had lifeguards there that would watch you. They had people patrolling with whistles, so they had lifeguards walking around. They had 2 lifeguards sitting on chairs, so you felt safe. But boy, if they didn't see what was going on, they couldn't save you. There was a bench there that they would bench people if you were running, if you were doing 2 off a dive, if you were if you were climbing up the ladder and the person on the diving board didn't jump off yet, they're whistling at you and they're going to bench you. I could remember being benched quite a few times with my friends, just because we're goofing off. You know, uh, my friend Jimbo and my cousin Ricky, we would jump off the high dive. And for some reason, we got into playing cowboys and Indians. We would do poses as we jumped off the high dive. And to this day, I could see Ricky and Jimbo, and we could go, "Hey, high dive." and just do like a bow and arrow stance as you're jumping off the diving board, which was pretty funny. I wanted to do that at Tough Mudder, but that was a 20-foot diving board that I ran at Tough Mudder. I just couldn't bear to do it. But man, boy, I wanted to. I was just too afraid. And that was just 5 years ago. So yeah, the diving boards at Elks or something else. And of course, you wanted to show off for everyone there. I could remember a lot of other friends that were there, like Dave and Ronnie and Ricky, and some of the baseball players I played with. Zeke was there, so there was a lot of people that you wanted to impress, that you didn't want to show, that you wanted to show them that you had no fear. You wanted to show them that you had no fear, so you try to dive. So it actually took me a while to dive off the low dive, but then it took me extra long to dive off the high dive. So that was kind of hard. I mean, people are all watching you. You always felt like eyes were on you whenever you were at the Elks. For some reason, it seemed like everybody was watching you. And in reality, they weren't. There was probably 100 kids in that pool, and you all thought that they were watching you, but they weren't. I could remember, they had a rope off between the rope between 6 foot and 12 foot, and you couldn't hang on the rope. You'd get whistled at. Lifeguard Heidi, lifeguard Frankie. My cousin was a lifeguard there, Kelly. Very good lifeguard there. Knew how to take care of a pool because he had a pool. And of course, the handsome Kelly, all the girls would go after Kelly. And of course, I'd have to say, hey, that's my cousin. So the girls would come running after me. That wasn't true, but I would say that, but the girls wouldn't come running. But, that was just a great time and great memories back there at the Elks. And, I could go on and on and on about the stories of Elks. And this is something that'll probably a time where you'll never forget. I'm in my early 50s now, but I could talk to people, today that were with the Elks with me, 30, 40 years ago, and they'll remember that time. I mean, I can remember my parents filming us. We had those 8 millimeter films back then, and they would take, there was no sound, of course, it was all video, but they would take an 8 millimeter of us just swimming in the pool. And that's what a lot of the parents did back then was, it was just something to get excited about. I can remember just having butterflies going there because I'm like, oh, who's going to be there? Is my friend is my friend this going to be there? Is my other friend going to be there? Who am I going to see? How long am I going to stay? Am I going to get on the basketball court? How am I going to be swimming today? Am I going to feel like diving? Stuff like that, I think really creates a great memories in your mind whenever you were a kid. I just wanted to get out of the house. There was things I had to do around the house. I had chores, whether I did them or not, that was another thing, but I always had chores. I always cut grass. If I didn't cut grass for my dad, I'd cut grass for neighbors or I'd cut grass for somebody else. But the main focus was to get all that stuff done before you went to the Elks because you knew once you got there and the whole gang was there, you weren't going to leave. You were there for the long haul. And the long haul it was. And then guess what? You woke up and you did it all over again. So, oh man, I don't know how I lasted that long. There was times that I'd go there and I don't even remember eating. They had a water fountain there. As a matter of fact, after a basketball game, I got, I don't know, I might have been 9, 10, 11 years old. I got out of a basketball game because they had the older kids, they had younger kids play, and they had a small fountain there. And there was a long line at the fountain just to get a drink of water. Back then, nobody brought bottles of water. I don't even know if they had bottles of water back then, but you had to just line up at the water fountain to get a drink in between playing basketball. And with that long line, you probably had 5 seconds. I can remember at football camp, they gave you 5 seconds. They had a counter there. The water boy counted. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, next. So that's how you had to drink. You had 5 seconds to drink before you got on to the next game. And I just remember leaning over one time and just getting scratched on my chest. And to this day, that scratch is still on my chest. So every time I shave or, I go swimming again, I see my scar and I go, Elks. There's probably a lot of folks out there that's going to listen to this that went to the Elks. And boy, I'd like to hear your comments. Feel free to type a comment below. Like and subscribe as always to Right on the Mark. Uh, this way you could hear other memories. A good friend of mine told me a long time ago, he says, if it's a good memory, keep sharing it. Just keep telling it. Don't let it die. Don't let it ever die. Because the moment you stop thinking about it, the moment you stop talking about it, you're going to forget about it. So why wouldn't you talk about all the good times? There's just too many to remember. Well, I hope you enjoyed this installment of Right on the Mark with your host, Mark Young. That about wraps it up for Right on the Mark with your host, Mark Young. See you next time.